Hi, everybody, and welcome to Oscar Bait, a look at best winning pictures of Oscar movies. I'm Connor,
And I'm Shane.
and today we got the randomized 1944 classic Mrs. Miniver.
1944.
1944. Is that
I
what I
thought
not? Is that not what I said?
I thought it came out in 42.
No, maybe it was 43.
'Let me just check. It says 42.
42.
It might have been the 43 Oscars because they're always weird like that, but it does say 1942.
Uh, all I know is that we were like one off from Casablanca. Yeah, it is 1942. Okay.
We're off to a great start already.
Well, yeah, you know what though? I don't see of all the things I put in my notes, the one I do not put in is actually when the movie came out.
Yeah, for some reason, like, whenever I was watching, I kept thinking 44, but I was like, no, it's not 44. But then I looked up I was looking at a list of Oscar winning movies ranked because I wanted to see where people kind of felt about this one. And I saw another movie that I thought said 42, and that can kind of confuse me, but I think it was 41. So I don't know. All these numbers start to really mess with my head.
What did they say about this movie? If I'm just interested.
It was so out of like the 92 winners there have been, this
Yeah.
one was ranked around. I want to on this one list that I looked at, it was around 60 or 70, somewhere around there. So I mean, it wasn't like super high or anything, but those lists are always subjective, anyways.
We should make one because we have
I was thinking about
the
that.
Google Doc.
Yeah,
Uh, we could do that after. We could do that either on this or off. We can either
maybe
do
we'll
it.
do it at the end of this one.
Okay, sounds
Just
good.
do, and then we can list them off, or at least our top five, I guess.
We have already done
As we go
5,
along.
so
Yeah, we'll put together the starting list then at the end of this episode.
all
But
right.
they did praise just a few things I did see on it. They were praising the director. Um, I guess he's just very William Wyler. I guess his overall vision in general, and they kind of put him as the what I read was he's kind of the missing link between Spielberg and Tom Ford.
That's
Like he's
interesting.
kind of like that middle ground kind of guy.
That's interesting comparison. Uh,
He also directed Ben-Hur, which I didn't know.
which we will get to. We might get
Yeah,
to it today. We don't. What next time? We don't know.
but anyways, before we really dive into it, I just
What do
want to
you
say, oh,
do? You
go
want
ahead.
me to list off the awards, or do you want to say your thing?
I was just gonna say this real quick.
Yeah,
You didn't tell me that this was a prequel to Dunkirk.
I did not. I wanted to. I really wanted to say, should I say that? But I think it'd be better if you went in blind. Uh,
Like, so, I mean, we can get into it a little bit more. I'll go ahead and list off the awards, and then I'll get into that little bit that I
okay.
thought about it.
See, so I actually have another comment that this is the center of all of those like shows about upper middle class British people doing random stuff,
hmm
like Downton Abbey and all of those. Must be like the originator of this, right?
Yeah.
But there's like some drama, but you're not really there for the drama. This is the
Mhm.
originator of that genre, right? We could
It's
agree.
yeah, it's a very interesting movie,
Uh,
like to talk
so
about.
so best picture, obviously.
hmm
Best director with William Wyler. Best actress with Greer Garson.
Which was
Best
the mom.
Yes, which is the
Okay.
titular Mrs. Miniver.
hmm
Best supporting actress with Teresa Wright, who is the girlfriend slash fiance slash wife.
hmm
Best screenplay and best cinematography.
Yeah, and so it was nominated. It looks like 12 awards, and it won 6. So I mean, it swept pretty well. I didn't sweep, but
It did really well, and
it did really well.
I mean, especially going back the second time, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally should have won that. At least I can see why it won it. I don't know if there's like
hmm
1940s Twitterverse is like, oh my god, it should totally not have won. There's this other movie that should have won.
Yeah, like
But
I don't know too much on the other movies that were picked, and not to get into it too much, but it kind of felt like the beginning felt a little bit slow, and I was starting to question it. But there's a point where everything starts to really pick up, and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty good.
yeah, the opening is weird, especially
hmm
I mean, we'll get into it. But yeah, it was very interesting, and I actually I think out of these like this movie, not like the most, but it's like
Mm.
up there actually. I would say I like it.
Yeah, and like I said, when it starts to really pick up is when I really got on board, and I was like, okay, wow, this movie is actually. I mean, considering it's from 1942 and black and white and square framed and everything like that. I mean, I was like, wow, I'm actually really getting into this movie.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So do you want me to get? Do you have any other preamble stuff, or do you want me to get right into it?
Oh, just that. So the whole Dunkirk thing. It's interesting because it's not really obviously it's not a prequel to Dunkirk, but that was something I wasn't expecting. But as soon as they saw it, first of all, that shot with all the boats was really awesome.
Yeah,
But
I have that in here because that is like that has to be one of the shots that said, "Okay, you're winning,"
yeah,
because because here are the two things with that shot. They're either A, all-wheel boats, which is impressive,
hmm
or there are miniatures that they had to remote control or like drag, and that is equally impressive.
yeah. And I was
So
just like, as soon as they said, like, I hadn't put two and two together until they said Dunkirk, and when they said that, I was like, oh wow, that's really awesome. Because it makes, if you've seen Dunkirk, it kind of adds to this movie a little bit because they don't show it, but what they're running into.
yeah, and I have comments about that in my notes.
But yeah, anyways, we go ahead.
All right, so hit the queue, which we don't actually have one, but synopsis time.
hmm
We have open with credits again that fade into a text crawl, almost like Star Wars could have done opening credits and then a text crawl, because this
Yep.
has that. Only instead of anything about space battles, this one says how the story begins in 1939 with everything going well, but that England will soon have to fight something.
hmm
From there transitions downtown to the titular Mrs. Miniver shopping and boarding a bus. She changes her mind and says she's going the wrong way, which that's a good exchange.
hmm
Where the guy is like, "Well, that's the only way we don't go." I was like, "That's
The
clever."
opposite way.
Yeah, I really like the dialogue in this. It's really snappy in a way that makes me even question the greatest show on earth. Well, I'm
hmm
like, okay, so that was a problem with that movie. That's just not a problem with this movie, like dialogue of this time.
No, you're right.
Uh,
The dialogue throughout this whole movie was really quick and snappy. And I think
uh,
that really helped the pace.
yes. She rushes. Oh, when we get my favorite character, it is on point. She rushes through the crowded streets to a haberdashery to buy the last of an expensive hat scarf thing.
hmm
Like with it, like bullet on it. It's weird. It's fine. She says she was afraid they sold it, and that's too expensive, so to pack it before she can change her mind. She boards the train with the vicar, which is like a priest of some kind. This is where my lack of knowledge on religion is really hampering me.
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't know what all that stuff means, but it's fine.
hmm
I know I can see by the way he's dressed what his deal is.
Yeah.
And they talk about buying nice things above their means and how the vicar understands. And Mrs. Miniver asks if he thinks trouble is coming. He says it is here as Lady Belden, a very rich, fancy lady, rants about people buying stuff and being pushed through as people are trying to buy above their means.
hmm
And says it's no wonder that the German army is invading, which, wow. Talk about, snobby.
Yeah, and I think at this point
I mean,
I
it's
wasn't
setting up where it's going
sure.
to go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was kind of like there, but I really didn't look too much into this movie other than the quick synopsis we saw on IMDb. But I didn't know if it was really going to go into that or if it was just kind of like a backdrop kind of thing.
Which it does both, really. Uh, so the train gets off at Bellum, where Mr. Ballard greets the people coming off and checking their tickets. Mr. Ballard asks Mrs. Miniver to show her something. He takes her to the station house, where he reveals his prized rose that he wants to name after her because of her kind heart and how this her being there always reminds him of the rose. And Mrs. Miniver agrees to the namesake and says that she must be going, but she steals a glance at the rose before she leaves. Now, this movie has the same problem as what other movie is it? not of a movie, of comics, of manga, because I'm like, it's supposed to be a red rose,
Mm-hmm.
but really it's black, right? Because it's not actually red.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. Like, I wish this movie did have colors so that we could really see, when it comes down to it, the two roses compared to each other.
Yeah, which is, I mean, they look kind of the same, but it's fine.
I know
Uh,
that's the funny thing is like they're all excited about it, and I'm like, well, I mean, I guess one's a little bit darker than the other one.
uh, Miniver, I just call her Miniver from this point on, and I don't think we actually learn her first name, which is fine because you don't need to know it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just call her Miniver. Takes a cab home, but outside her husband is sitting in a car that he says is above his means and that he would take it, but to bring it by after dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and not to tell his wife how expensive it is. Mr. Miniver, whose name we will learn later, but in this paragraph, in fact, but I haven't said that yet, comes in and greets his daughter Judy, who's practicing her piano lessons, and runs into Toby, who's running down the stairs with the cat Napoleon. And I liked Toby is like, I get his point, but
Toby from The Office.
yes, Toby from The Office.
Oh man.
Uh, he has to reset the clock, Mr. Miniver does, and enters the bedroom where Mrs. Miniver is talking about her extravagant how extravagant her hat is,
Mm-hmm.
and she has to cover up the purchase from her husband Clem by claiming that her son Vin is coming down from Oxford. Meanwhile, one of their maids helps clean out all the boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and Mrs. Miniver says she'll tell her husband about the hat after dinner.
Which I think that's so funny because he's like, well, I'm gonna just bring the car around later this afternoon.
But yeah, setting up. Okay, so everything's gonna go down that night.
Mm-hmm.
That night, as a matter of fact, is how I started in my next paragraph. Miniver has dinner with her kids and says that she is going to go to that they're gonna go to the station to get Vin. Toby asks if Vin is still a vegetarian, and Miniver says that's just a phase, and that he's going through a phase now, and he is super hyped that he's going through a phase. That's really
Mm-hmm.
funny. She kisses them goodnight, then goes downstairs for coffee and biscuits, where one maid, Gladys, asks if she can go down to the post office to see her beau, Horace. Clem lights a
Bliss.
cigar. Yeah, like from the Harry Potter movies.
Mm-hmm.
Clem lights a cigar, and they both talk about their extravagant purchases. Miniver compares a hat to a new tire, while Clem says his car's been driving too slow and it's been giving him a lot of trouble.
I love this scene because he's like every typical guy talking to their wife or girlfriend that's kind of like, yeah, my car has just been acting up a little bit, or my shoes, they're just the bottoms of them are just getting a little slick, like trying to talk in a reason why they got something new.
Yeah, which is really good, which is, again, dialogue on point right here. It's real
Mm-hmm.
good. Miniver reasons uh, he's up to something, and they take a drive out around the countryside in the new car. At bedtime, Clem says he thought she would think the purchases were extravagant, and says it's okay to be extravagant once in a while. And Clem says also it's okay to buy stuff because that's what money is for, but it is also a trap, which is
Mm-hmm.
really smart. Miniver sneaks away to show off her hat. Clem doesn't really like it, which is a good point. Like, I like how he's like, eh, but says as long as she likes it, it's fine. But he
Yeah.
really doesn't care. When Clem asks how much, she says not much, not as much as for someone who can buy a car like they have, which is a really good turn of how to get out of that. Because if, like, it's an expensive hat, but if we can afford that nice car, it's fine. Clem compliments her and says, as long as she thinks so. Miniver places the hat at the end of their bed. They talk like it is a sleepover because they sleep next to each other in different beds.
Mm-hmm. Which
And
is really odd.
I mean maybe that's a code thing. Maybe I don't know.
Like, was it something that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how things were back then, but I guess nowadays it's just really odd.
I mean, yeah, it depends. That was like a stereotype where it's like people did that, but did they really do it? And
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll get like a play on that whenever we do It Happened One Night. I think we'll get
Mm-hmm.
like a twist on this, and I think that came
Yeah.
out before this, but I don't know. Anyway, they talk like it's a sleepover, and Miniver
Mhm.
rushes to turn off the dressing room light before going to bed. The Minivers head to the train station where Vin gets off and greets his family. They remark how he used to have a mustache, and Vin says you can't waste time in life on frivolous things. On the drive back, he reveals that he's become a woke millennial who wants to, because that's exactly what he is. So Vin is my
Yeah.
favorite character, and there's
Uh-huh.
this reason why where I'm like, oh, he's just the 1930s version of a woke millennial, and it's
Mhm.
hysterical. And an hysterical transition that has him talking while they're driving to continuing to talk while he is, outside. He says how he's developed a social conscience, just like
Mhm.
social justice is where like, oh, is that what they're all looking at when they make fun of the stereotype? Because this is it. This is it right here. And I loved
He's
it so
funny.
much.
Yeah.
And he says how the feudal system is still going on, and it's like even now, which is the same to, people saying that slavery is still going on and racial injustices and all of that stuff. So it's kind of that comparison.
Mhm.
Gladys enters with a guest, and this is another thing I like about Vin, where he literally says, "What it is, Gladys." He doesn't say it like I would think they would say it nowadays, but he does say it, and that makes me very happy.
Yeah.
Uh, she introduces Carol Belden, the granddaughter of Lady Belden.
Carol
Vince,
Baskin.
yes, Belden. Not I listened to that song a dozen times, but I can't remember how that rap goes. Uh, yes, no. By the way, Carol Belden is also one of my favorite characters, and she kind of
Yeah.
has to be, considering
Mhm.
what they do with her, and it makes sense watching it
Yeah,
a
that
second
was
time.
not to say it, but that was wow. Okay, wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, that which we'll get to. I'm like, that must have been like the first ever. I mean, it should not. It must have been like the first twist like that. It feels like where everything that does is looking at this movie,
Mhm.
but they make it work, and we'll get to that. Vin says Belden is proof of the feudal system. Carol says to excuse her, and she is making a request that her grandmother doesn't know about.
Mhm.
She wants Miniver to ask Mr. Bellard to remove the rose from the flower show, since her grandmother's always won, and she doesn't want her to be hurt. Vin pontificates before saying it is not an open competition, and since Mr. Bellard is not of the ruling class, it proves his point. That's not really open, because he just wants her to win.
Mhm.
Minerva excuses him, but Vin says he means what he says. Kara defends herself by talking about the work she's done in the London slums, but Vin says that doesn't count since she lives in the lap of luxury, which is again more of that like woke millennial like back and forth
Yeah.
thing, which is all I can see is like you know a middle class
He's so
person,
funny.
being like, man, there's real injustice, and a rich like upper middle class person of the same age being like, well, I might be rich, but here's some good stuff I've done. And he's like, that doesn't count. I haven't
Mhm.
done anything. And she calls him out for that, but that doesn't
Mhm.
count. And it's really great. Uh, Carol says it's the only thing she knows, and how Vin only sees stuff in the theoretical, and that real change is actual action. Vin storms off after getting permission from Carol, which is very funny because he like argues with his dad that he doesn't need to do it and then does it anyway.
Mhm.
Carol
Typical.
still, yeah, which is very funny. Carol still sees him as a nice guy for some reason,
Mhm.
and says she does look bad coming over here to say that, which I like. I like that she's like, yeah, I know I look bad, but this is just something I care about.
Yeah.
The customer, no, that's the next scene, and says that she's glad to meet them and that they'll see them at the sailing club dance. In an interlude, we got two of them back to back. At a local grocery store, the owner and a customer argue if Mr. Ballard is again moving above his station. The customer says she'll go somewhere else, but the owner, Mr. Foley, because the owner, Mr. Foley, isn't civil.
Mm-hmm.
But he just says, rightly, that his project is too good, so you won't leave. And an even better interlude, Mr. Ballard is ringing the church bells with his partner and talking about the Rose debacle. And Ballard says Miniver is the nicest person, and that even though it's just a hobby, he should still be able to enter and compete and win,
Mm-hmm.
which is really good, and I like that.
Yep.
Let's see. At the sailing ball club, whatever it's called, the Miniver parents remark just how great Carol is. Carol comes over to say hello. Miniver says to give Vin time about his outburst, but apologizes. Just then, a waiter comes over with a note for Carol to meet Vin by the docks, and she plays coy with the Miniver parents about it, which is very funny. But she's like, "Oh, you would be surprised."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, she's really good in this movie.
I love her so much. She's so good. At the dock, Vin apologizes for his tone specifically. I like that distinction where he's like, "I'm sorry for how I said it, but I'm still right." That's a really good distinction he makes. And they talk and flirt back with each other. Carol says she wants to tango. Vin says he likes to dance, but there's no time for that anymore. Carol asks if it's time to lose a sense of humor. This gets into Vin's heads, and they dance to Miniver and Clem's surprise. Outside, Vin mentions how he thought of her and has known her for years. He calls her fat when she was a little kid, which, boy, that's not how I would go about that, but Yeah, you were so cute and fat when you were a little kid. I have a crush on you. That's okay.
You had
know what?
sausage legs.
She did have sausage legs. By the way, the fact that everyone I'm pretty sure is American and they're doing British accents is kind of distracting.
Mm-hmm.
That's just something that was it's not really a problem, but that's just a thing I noticed.
Yeah.
Yep. He asks for a second date, only for Carol to say she's going to Scotland for a couple months. Vin asks if he can write to her. They dance and say how it is a wonderful night. And everyone pauses for the band to play a song. I couldn't figure out. I thought it was the national anthem, but I'm not actually sure if that's what it was. Right? Because that's kind of what it
Yeah, I
sounds.
wasn't. That's what I thought too. I wasn't entirely sure, but it sounded like it.
It sounded like it, but not enough of the notes were the same, so I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
sure. Months later, which you don't know it's months later till later in the scene, which made it confusing the first time to watch it. At the church, Ballard and his partner debate if they'll have a flower show if Germany attacks. Ballard says that the roses will be around, but England won't, which is also a good line. Because he's like, I don't know if England's gonna be around, but flowers, that's good. That's always one of those things I like. Where it's the Earth will be fine even if we're not here.
Yeah.
So, I always do that because I lose my track. The Minivers take their pews when Lady Belden and Carol get their own booth, essentially, in the church.
Mm-hmm.
A procession of future lawsuits come in singing psalms. I'm not going to stop that joke.
I was thinking the same thing again.
I'm not going to stop that joke. Maybe it's England, so maybe it's different, but I'm still not going to stop.
That's for any movie prior to Spotlight.
So any movie we do after when Spotlight comes out, which is I think only 4 or 5 movies, we can't make that joke.
Yeah.
I don't even think there are Catholic.
We've already done 2 of them, so there's only 2 left.
Oh goodness. Vin shows his sister where they are in the book and sees Carol across the aisle and accidentally pushes Toby into the seat in front of him, which is really funny. Turns out she's returned from Scotland, early. They steal glances at each other as the father, that's religious father, not his father, speaks only for a higher up in the church to come and speak to him. The pastor or preacher or priest, again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Goes to the pulpit and has everyone sit down and says that the Prime Minister has officially declared a war. I can't wait till we do more movies like the King's Speech, and we're gonna have a full like cinematic, like World War II cinematic universe
Yeah, for real.
of,
Because I
of
mean, you
all the
can match
things.
this up with a bunch of movies.
So I can't wait for that. He says he will not be continuing the service, and everyone will have their own duties to pretend to do that they will have to do, and that
This
they have.
for
Yeah.
this for me was when the movie finally picked up. Because at this point, like I was enjoying some of the interactions and the characters, but it was just moving a little like slow for me getting to the point of the movie. Like I wasn't sure if the focus was just going to be on the flower competition or where the movie was going, but it was at this point when they announced that they were going to be in war and all that I kind of assumed where the story was going.
And we haven't even got to one of my favorite shots is in this. One of my favorite shots in the movies in this scene, uh, where they obviously have prayers for peace that exist, but they also pray for their country, which is very distinct. And he mentions how some people have fought for this country for like 1,000 years, and then you cut to the Beldens, where there's a tomb of a soldier like right behind them, and that's a great shot
Mm-hmm.
because it's saying that's this family. This family has done
Yeah.
that. It's really interesting that none of them actually fight because they're both women.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and how they must now defend uh, for and fight for justice and freedom, all of the good stuff. After the Sambo service, Toby reacts with how excited he is to be bombed. Which, boy, that comes back to bite him. And meanwhile, Vin talks to Carol but does not get very far. The Minivers return home, where the maid Gladys is having a fit since Horace has been conscripted for the military. At dinner, Gladys is crying terribly while serving dinner and says that Horace will push himself forward and wants to kill Hitler himself, which is very funny, especially because she's going around and when it's Mr. Miniver's turn, Clem's turn, she still goes all the way around the table again to give him his food.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very funny and good blocking and staging. Which is what I guess I kind of missed about or didn't like about Greatest Show on Earth was sure it's still like that same thing where they are all it's static, basically static camera angles. But they don't do
Yeah.
anything fun with the blocking, which just this does a lot with blocking, which I really
Mm-hmm.
like to make it
Mm-hmm.
more interesting. Horace comes in to say bye. They have a drink and give Gladys a drink as well. The Minivers let Gladys walk Horace to the station. Horace says the war will make a lot of difference, and Vin mentions how he will be joining the Royal Air Force instead of going on the front lines. Toby, being, of course, the best boy, says Horace can write all of his letters in blood. Being best boy, he's like, he would
That was
Toby
funny.
Toby would have loved Call of Duty, right? He would have been 100% like a Call of Duty and Fortnite player.
Toby was the original roaster.
Indeed.
Don't worry,
Horace,
you can write it in blood.
oh my goodness. But his acting is way worse though.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you can write it in blood.
And I'm just thinking, oh, thanks for that.
Horace and Gladys leave, and Vin asks if he can go to the Belden place. His sister asks if she can go, and then Vin yells at her like every older brother has done.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "No, you can't go." He doesn't. He's not that whiny, but it feels like he's that whiny.
Mm-hmm.
After a quiet moment, which is there are a lot of those, which is really good. It builds a lot of like how somber this is.
Yeah.
Miniver remarks how Vin is too young, and she sits and thinks over her son's possible fate, which is not what she doesn't actually do that, but that's what I'm assuming is going on when she's just sitting there. That's one of those, I'm inferring what's going on in that scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we gonna have any movies that abstract where I'm gonna have to just like I don't know what's happening in this scene, so I think this is what's going on. Are we gonna have any of those movies? Do you think?
Probably. I know there's a couple on here that are probably like that. I'm not looking through that right now.
Oh yeah, if we do, we might not even know what they are yet.
That's true. Since I know we haven't seen all of these.
We haven't seen most of them. Out of the
Mm-hmm.
90 some, we have not seen most of them.
Mm-hmm.
You just imagine there's going to be a point where we can say we've seen over half of the best and award-winning movies.
I'm waiting for the point where we say that we've seen all of them.
Well, yes, of course, but you can't. You gotta do chunks, right? You gotta do 10%, and then you gotta do,
Exactly.
at the Belden. We got other stuff to do. We can't be doing this. At the Belden estate, Vin talks to Carol. Carol lets on that he did indeed write to her letters from Scotland to her, and that she just thought he was crazy,
Mm-hmm.
crazy for her, and that boy crazy and all that stuff. And it's only the third time they've ever seen each other. She says they don't know each other very well, so Vin proposes, not that yet, proposes they see each other every day they can, like they're in high school.
Yeah.
Lady Belden comes in and says she knows the last name Miniver, and then goes on to call it a tramp rose. Boy. And
what a time it was.
acts very hoity-toity about it all.
Uh-huh.
Belden says she does not need help and hates that the war is going to make unimportant people very important and give them power. The air raid siren goes off. Belden says it's a fake alarm, but Vin takes charge and tells her to get the servants and herself into the cellar.
Mm-hmm.
Vin calls home and says everything is under control. Clem says that. At the Miniver house, Foley comes in and says that they have a light showing from the basement and that they have to close it up. They go downstairs and do that. Then Foley, being on his absolute grind, starts giving them the hard sell on canned goods. He's like, you're probably going to need some sardines. You know what? We don't know what Mussolini is going to do, but you're probably going to need like 500 cans of sardines from Italy.
Wow, it's almost like they're protecting themselves from the coronavirus.
Indeed. So he's grinding it out, which I like. He's always working hard. The siren goes off again. Toby asks if the war's over, and the mom is like, no, it's just the first day, and he's happy it's only the first day.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Later, just a time later, we don't know how long, a German spokesperson says that France has lost and that they too should give up. The ball patrons are unworried. They turn the radio off just in time to get exposition about a German plane that came down, and the pilot still might be out there. A patron asks what would happen if the pilot came in right now, and says that some go to Oxford to learn English just as good as they do. Which made me think that this is going to be like, they're going to go after Vin because he, is very, against England. I thought they were going to do that whole thing.
Yeah.
But they don't. Clem comes in after his lake patrol, which you don't know what that is until later, but maybe when the movie came out, they would know what that means. That's one of those things where I assume people would know what that is, because I certainly didn't until they said something. Vin comes in as well and shows off his pilot officer's pin and says that he got stationed in Belém and has a week leave for getting an 85 on the test, which I guess is good. That's a B. That's a solid B. The Miniver men return home to see Miniver Mayhem and Carol at the top of the stairs. Vin races to meet them and shows off his pin. He recounts the story of a pilot who cuts off their engines to signal to their mother.
Foreshadowing.
It is foreshadowing, which I actually didn't notice the first time, so I was very confused when that scene comes up again.
It wasn't until the second time that I really picked up on it. Like when, yeah.
Wait, you watched the movie twice?
No. So, I mean, I guess we're going to go over it anyways, but when he leaves, you can hear him doing it.
Yeah.
And she says something about it, and at that point I was like, oh, wait, what? But then on his way back, whenever she was like, oh no, what if he's not coming back or whatever, and then the planes are on their way back, and it happens again, like later on.
Oh, yes,
and she's like, oh yeah, it is him. That's when I was like, oh, okay, I got it.
Yes, and it sets up here, which I missed the first time I watched it, and then I got it this time, so I'm like, okay, they didn't just spring that on us. Miniver says he will go into fighting, Mrs. Miniver. The Miniver parents leave to give their kids, to see the kids, giving Vin and Carol time to kiss. At dinner, Gladys says she is going to the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. Later, Toby asks multiple times if Vin is going to marry Carol. After some debate and playful conversation by Carol, she says she would. Toby says Vin is scared, but this causes Vin to do it anyway. Be like, okay, we're just going to get married. Let me ask you now.
Yeah, well, fine then. If you're going to tell me that I won't, I'll do it then.
And I really like how he's like, oh, this must be the worst proposal ever. Yep, just in time for the phone to ring. It's for Pilot Officer Vin Miniver, Vincent. He is called in. Clem says that they should not write off, that this does stink. They has to leave so soon. Miniver asks Vin why, and Vin says that they don't ask why in the military, which seems exactly against his old ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But you see that those ways are not gone later.
Yep.
Carol asks if he's going to be going into action. Clem says not necessarily, and then hurries off to get the car. Both ladies look up the stairs at Vin and go to see him off. Vin proposes to wait to tell the grandmother, Carol's grandmother, until he returns. He says bye to Judy and Toby Toby says he wants a gun as a souvenir. Boy, if only. That night, Clem and Miniver get ready for bed. Miniver turns off the lamp so they can open up the curtains because they have to have total blackout. They discuss how happy they are for the engagement. They lay and listen to the rush and hum of the plane's engines above them. One of them sounds to be cutting off and on intermittently. Miniver realizes it's Vin sending her a goodbye signal. Deep into the night, they get a call for Clem to go out on his patrol. Miniver gets up as well to make him coffee and sandwiches. After trying to stop him from going, which is very funny, he's like, "Is that in order?" And he's like, "You can't go." "Is that in order?" Which he can't ignore that.
Which I didn't realize until you actually hear the explosions and everything, that they were really that close to the war, I guess.
Yeah,
and I guess it makes sense, in the part that's about to come up. I guess that makes sense too, because they'd have to be pretty close.
Indeed. At the docks, they load up the boats, and other sailors remark how they don't know what is going on, just as they got the order to fill up the boats and head out.
Mm-hmm.
In the bar, in the discussion, they remark about being dragged out of their beds at 2 o'clock in the morning is just too far for the war, which, boy, they don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Only for someone to come in and tell them to go to Ramsgate, which I don't know what that is, but it looks like, I just know the Thames.
Yeah.
In England, but I guess this is another one. In the trek, platoons of boats load up onto the river. And if it was not obvious where this was going, a military vessel comes up and informs them that this is the sea plot of Dunkirk.
At which point you pause the movie, pull up on another TV, watch Dunkirk, and then come back and finish Mrs. Miniver.
Yeah. Meaning Vin is currently flying with Tom Hardy in order to rescue Harry Styles.
Maybe Vin is Tom Hardy.
But that doesn't make sense because he comes back in a plane.
Oh, that's true.
The boat coming up sequence is again great because I assume they're either real or a ton of miniatures. Either way, it's impressive.
So what did you think? Because I was trying to figure that out. They looked really real, but I don't know if that's something they would have been able to do.
I like not knowing.
Yeah.
That's one of those things.
I just get curious about stuff like that.
That's one of those things, like, if The Greatest Show on Earth was in black and white, maybe it would make that train crash at the end seem less like the miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a problem with that movie. That's just what they did, and it looks good.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't really care because it looks so good. I'm not really worried about it. Do we have special features on that?
You keep talking and I will check on that.
Cool.
I am curious about that.
Miniver is having trouble sleeping, so she heads out to the river, where she runs into to Mr. Ballard, just finishing up his morning fishing. They hear gunfire from the distance. Miniver says neither men are back yet. Ballard says they will come back and will see the work of the Lord and that you can't beat the Bible. He also says that the flower show is seeming to continue on as it's supposed to, and that he has indeed entered. Ballard leaves, and while strolling along, Miniver sees muddy boots, and then she comes further up upon a sleeping man with a gun in his hand. The man awakens. Miniver runs off, and the man, the downed German pilot from earlier, pursues her. She makes it to her house only for him to come in and demand food, drink, and a coat, or he will shoot. Miniver says everyone else is asleep. After fulfilling the pilot's request, he passes out due to the pain and fatigue, giving Miniver time to grab the gun as well as call the police. Miniver tells the soldier that the war won't last forever. The soldier agrees, since they will come and wipe them out. He says they bombed Barcelona, Warsaw, and Rotterdam, and says that they were up against them. He says they will do the same to England. Miniver slaps him, which I have trivia about that scene. That scene was reshot after World War II. After Pearl Harbor, once America was actually in the war.
Interesting.
Because before then, America was still, why am I blanking on it? I literally said that word earlier today. They were separate from it. They were, isolationists still. So they were not technically against Germany yet. So they couldn't have a slap the German pilot, but now that they're in the war, they reshot so she could do that.
Well, on a quick side note, there aren't any special features on the Vudu copy that I have. And just to see if there was anything, I went on YouTube to see if there are any kind of special features, and there's not. There is a trailer. Dang it.
I wonder what that trailer is like.
No, it looks like movie clips, classic trailers is the channel. So, I don't know.
How long is it?
2 minutes and 41 seconds.
Huh. That's odd. A lot of trailers a lot of old trailers like that are usually really long. The cops and doctors show up and take him away, and don't bother to ask a statement.
No,
they don't bother to take a statement.
I don't think they really cared at that point. They got themselves a German.
Miniver sits down from all the excitement, only for Toby to come in and ask who it was. She cannot speak, and then she ends up hearing Clem's boat arriving. Miniver and the kids rush toward the lake, where Clem returns unharmed and the boat mostly harmed. He says, I had to readjust myself. He says he's awfully tired, and he asks if they heard from Vin, and they say he has not come back yet. Back at the house, Miniver gets the bed ready for Clem to sleep. She closes the curtains and tucks him in. Before leaving, she hears the familiar hum and rhythmic cutting of engines, confirming Vin has indeed returned. Hours later, Clem stirs. Miniver comes in and greets him. Clem remarks on the breakfast he was due 10 hours ago that Vin had instead. Miniver says Vin went with Carol to break the engagement news to Lady Belden. Clem says he wants a big plate of ham and eggs. The maid, Ada, who has also been there, but just not been important until now, leaves to get said food. Miniver mentions how she read about Dunkirk in the papers. Clem says he is proud of himself and that he is sad she had a quiet time, but that's what women are for and men are for. On cue, Ada says that they're all out of ham on account of the German pilot eating it. Miniver plays coy. Clem says she's driving him crazy, but she handled it. Miniver gets the bed ready, but Clem slaps her behind. Ada comes in and sees the moment, but Lady Belden says has come for a visit. I don't know I really don't know what the slap on the backside is supposed to be.
I don't know. Because I mean, she almost acted like it was a bad thing. Like I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of
She,
those I'm
she
not sure what's supposed to
like
be.
she seemed to act like it was a bad thing, but that's I mean that's not necessarily a bad thing since they're married and
Because
people do
yeah,
that.
yeah, well, for other reasons, right? They're married for other reasons.
True.
Because it's one of those, is that like spousal abuse or is that foreplay stuff? And you
I
don't
guess
know.
I guess nowadays it would be foreplay stuff.
Uh, I don't really want to get into the specifics of 1940 sex lives, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Miniver says she was scared and pretties herself is scared to meet her and
hmm
pretties herself up for the occasion. This is also one of my favorite scenes that's coming up. In the sitting room, Lady Belden confronts Miniver over the marriage. Belden is not pleased and says they are too young. She wants Carol to wait. Miniver says Vin is the best, which I would
hmm
also agree he is the best.
He's hilarious.
Uh, Miniver also claps back at how the Beldens are known to wed early, since during the Crusades, some married to 12-year-olds.
Which is hilarious because she's like, well, she kind of gets stumped on that one.
Boy, that's the biggest clap. I mean, I am kind of upset that America doesn't have that kind, like United States of America doesn't have that kind of history to do that with. Does not have families old enough to clap back to like that.
Uh-huh. That was funny though, because she was just like, well, I mean, you guys are known for marrying young.
This
Well,
is book
yeah,
my
but
daughter my this is this book my daughter Judy read. You know Judy. There's this book and it said I read it and it says that you guys marry 12-year-olds. Uh Brennan said that she's old-fashioned, but Miniver mentions how they are at war and that Lady Belden herself married at 16 and that her parents are not pleased with her either. Belden says she doesn't wants to do it because her husband died a few weeks after marrying and died in a war, which I do not know what like 1800s war that would be because it would not be World War One because I would have only been
um,
well, I guess it might have been no because if she is 80 and she married at 16 and it's 1939, I guess in the movie time.
the Revolutionary War. No, that's too. No, Civil
No,
War.
no, because there weren't any foreign powers. I don't think.
Mm,
But no, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, there's so many. Who knows?
the Revolutionary. That's
Well,
too early.
this was based on a book. I wonder if it says in the book.
I don't know.
Uh,
Maybe you should read that one next.
oh. But then we'd have to come back and be like, okay, here are the comparisons,
True.
which we have to do anyway, and we're already 47 minutes in, and we got another thing to cover.
We're just gonna say Revolutionary War, even though it's wrong.
Is absolutely wrong. That doesn't make any sense. Miniver says Carol should be happy. Belden says Carol will go her own way anyway, and that she was beaten before she started trying to stop this. Brennan agrees that Vin is a nice boy and that she sees why Ballard named a rose after her. She then requests tea, showing a sign of growth.
hmm
Later, in another of my favorites, there's so many favorite scenes in this movie. Later, Miniver is reading Alice in Wonderland, which is not what it's called. They call it Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
hmm
We just know Alice in Wonderland. To Judy and Toby, only to pull back and reveal that they are sleeping in a small bunker.
Yeah, which is really cool. I love the camera work in this movie.
It's so good. Again, that we haven't even gotten to the best shot of the movie either.
hmm
Oh my! See what I'm saying? This is such a good movie.
Yeah, I haven't even done the review yet, but yeah, it's gonna be a longer review. I feel like.
It's so good. Clem shows off a fan that can detect poison and how to close it, which that's a really good exchange where she's like, well, does it stop it? And he's like, well, you do this. Click. And then you die because it's so hot in here.
hmm
He and Miniver talk of better times via Alice in Wonderland quotes. And that
Which
Vin
is
is
cool.
returning, yeah, which I like, and is returning from his honeymoon with Carol the next day. Yeah, all of the dialogue is really good, and it's very like there's very bad way. Like I could see a worse movie that could have still won doing it way worse than this movie did.
Mm-hmm.
They also mentioned how Ada has left them to join the war effort as well. So that's literally just the four of them now.
Yeah.
All of their servants have gone, even though they are. I like how they're supposed to be middle class, but then they also have maids.
Yeah, and I like how in the beginning, like it's a cool transition. We're not at the end yet, but it's cool to see at the beginning how they had all these people working for them and how they weren't in the war and they were spending all this money to slowly progress to being on their own and having to support themselves and then not having everything like they used to.
Well, the transition at the end of the very end,
Yeah,
where we
yeah, that.
reveal that's amazing. We'll get to
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
During this, they are bombed relentlessly, shaking the whole bunker. The parents hold onto their kids, and Toby shows just how scared he truly is about dying in the war, showing that all of that, Fortnite bravado was false. All of that, because you absolutely would be like one of those 9-year-olds who would say, I did this to your mom over,
Oh, well, then he's not
chat.
playing Fortnite. He's playing Call of Duty.
He would be called. Well, yeah, because realize, Shane, that kids don't probably play Call of Duty anymore. That's clearly just our reference point.
Oof. That makes me feel bad then because I still play it every now and then.
Anyway, that's why I'm saying Fortnite, because that is what
That's true.
Toby's reference point would be. The next day, the Miniver Belden family, I hyphenated that,
Hmm.
pick up Vin and Carol from the train station. They talk about how great a time they had in Scotland. Belden and Ballard have verbal sparring over flowers, which I like Belden's line. Well, the best thing about your flower is its name. And I'm like, oh, that's such a good line.
Hmm.
Clem says he can't go to the flower show because he has patrol. The Minivers bring the newlyweds back to the house and see just how much damage the bombing had done. The walls are cracked, the kitchen is utterly destroyed, and the pillars and bookcases are all knocked around. It's like when you watch it a second time, you just see how much attention is built paid to the house,
Hmm.
and then it's just all not being there is like some haunting stuff.
Yeah.
Judy and Toby surprise the newlyweds with a piano tune. The Minivers show the newlyweds to their room, while Clem stares at the destruction with his children, which is absolutely the best scene in the movie. The
Hmm.
shot.
Yeah. Again, camera work and directing.
Oh, so he definitely should have won.
Hmm.
In the room, Carol and Miniver discuss how she is worried about losing Vin. He is so full of life, but may die, killed any day or hour. And I like that she's talking about herself, and she doesn't know it.
Oh
Because
yeah.
that's what's going on in that scene now.
Yeah.
It's like, she's talking about herself. Oh my god. I'm already feeling stuff. Can you tell I like this movie a lot?
You do. It'll be interesting when we get to the end ranking these first five.
I would probably say it's not. I mean, I might like it more than the other movies, but it's not better than the other movies. Some of them.
Well, once we get done with the thing, we'll talk about it because I've got a preliminary ranking right now.
Miniver says she too has faced this possibility. Kara says she will be happy every moment she can, but will have a lifetime of tears, which is again so tragic, and they don't even know it yet. They hug and Vin returns with their luggage. Before leaving, Miniver mentions how the Glee Club has a new number, which I only mentioned because I had this great line. At the flower show, everyone peruses the flowers and drinks while the Glee Club practices for regionals. Yes, because in 2020, a Glee reference is very topical.
It's very funny.
But hey, I still see it on Netflix all the time.
And it's actually really cool. I want to just comment on the fact that they brought back the whole flower thing. Because, I mean, it was brought up throughout the whole movie. And it was originally what I thought the focus of the movie was on. But then, obviously, it took a turn to being something totally, a totally different kind of story. But then bringing back the flower competition kind of made you feel as if things were back to normal.
A little bit, which is good.
Yeah, it was a levity leading up to the final act.
Also, why I say that this is like the template for all of those like Downton Abbey like shows,
Mm-hmm.
which I haven't actually watched those, but that's what this must feel like, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you're in it for, oh, don't you love all the rich people doing rich people stuff? But that's not why you're there.
Mm-hmm.
People take their seats. The Miniver Beldens watch from their own little section. Balor joins the group as the judges examine the flowers closely. Belden requested decisions from the to get the show going. Vin asks if she saw it, and she says she did, but she'll let the judges decide. Vin says she'll win, and she's like, "Do you think I like bribed them?" And she's like, "No, you're scared. They're scared of you." Which is
You didn't
again
have to
shows
bribe him.
that he might not be as woke millennial as he was at the beginning, which I miss. But he
Mm-hmm.
still has some of that in him, which I like.
It kind of
She
shows a
yeah,
little bit of growth also at the same time.
yes. She gets the decision, and she has in fact won.
Of
Miniver
course.
asks if it's important, and Belden agrees. Miniver says, he is, I've totally lost where I am now. Anyway, I just skipped that. Belden, because they argue about like if she thinks she should have won. I didn't phrase it correctly in my notes, but that's what's going
Yeah.
on. And Belden just says she has this way of looking, and Miniver says she can change the choice if she wants to.
Mm-hmm. So of course she doesn't really want to at first, but for
Belden.
her to grow as a character, then
Well, I think it's this moment right here where she asks the judge if there was bias, and they say no, but it clearly looks like there was.
yeah, and she understands that she didn't actually win, and that's when it like kind of makes her feel like, okay, maybe I need to do the right thing.
Boy, can you believe that Do the Right Thing did not win Best Picture? After going through all, which is a movie I've seen like 2 or 3 times for film class, so
I
I'm
had to
very.
do the same. I had to do the same thing.
Oh, that's also a good movie. Now that we're off
Uh
topic again,
huh.
after going through all the other awards, she looks to Miniver, and the roses. In that moment, she decides that Mr. Ballard deserves to win.
hmm
After a gracious losing speech about wanting to cut off other people's heads, and cajoling from the crowd, Ballard gets his trophy, only to learn that the Germans are attacking and they all must go to their stations.
hmm
Lady Belden goes to her house, which she has a great line before that, which she's like, anyone who wants to can come to my house. We've got all the sardines they want.
Which I just want to say before we get to this last bit, this was where I was expecting Vin to not come back for sure. Like just how a movie would normally do it, you would think.
Yeah, and I actually didn't know where it was going,
hmm
so I wasn't expecting someone to die,
Like
actually.
I was just half expecting it, like, oh, everything's going well now, but then he's got to go back, and I'm just like, man, he's probably not going to make it back, and that's going to suck.
Also another thing that I missed that I like is that the Mrs. Miniver Rose pertains to both the titular character and the Carol. I like
hmm
that. Uh, anyway, they drop Lady Belden off, and Miniver and Carol drop Vin off at the airfield. The two women drive back to the house, but are bombarded from all sides. They decide to stop and wait out the battle, which I don't know if is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's one of those like I don't know. I can't like if it's a hurricane, I could see doing that, but I don't
hmm
know if it's
Sure, let's go
true.
with it.
Anyway, it's fine. It's not really a problem. But after the bombardment on both sides, they decide to. Yep, already said that. Doing this, they see an RAF Royal Air Force plane crash down to the right, like right beside them, as well as there's a dogfight above. They're like, that could be Vin, which there's no body, so you know it's not him.
hmm
After a close call, Miniver says they were lucky only to see Carol leaning over bleeding, and that the village is being destroyed. Miniver looks up to see puncture holes along the convertible's roof. She drives home and calls for an ambulance, but they are all out. She requests the very next one, only it's too late. Carol
Mm.
dies on the Miniver floor as Miniver is comforting her and saying she will be all right.
God, this is depressing part.
Miniver goes to get a glass of water, and in that moment, Carol takes her dying breath. Miniver holds her like Mary holds Jesus in that famous painting that's name has forgotten. I have forgotten. She looks at Carol, hugs her, and cries. And boy, I was heartbroken.
Mm-hmm.
I was so like, oh no. Which is again why a second watch you see why they make Carol such a likable character because they need this to pay off. Oh, it's so good. Later, Clem exits the room and pulls back the blinds to let the sun in. They sit in the silence for a beat, only for Vin to come home. They both desperately compose themselves, which is again blocking on point.
Mm-hmm. Excellent
Miniver,
directing, of course.
yes, well, yes. Miniver goes to break the news, but Vin already knows somehow.
It's a feeling.
Probably it's like the Force thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which the Force is already like based on stuff, so it's that.
Yeah.
Already knows. Miniver says he should rest, but Vin needs to see her. He ascends the stairs again, but only death awaits above him. Because again, we've seen him do it like 3 or 4 times, and he's happy,
Mm-hmm.
giving you all of that good like setting up. Here's the normal. Now it's not normal.
Yeah.
Miniver cries into her husband's shoulders. At the church, everyone takes their seats. Some injured vets return, along with Lady Belden, all alone. The choir of lawsuits marches in. I'm still not going to stop the joke, even in a sad moment. The presence reveals that the church archways are being held up by beams that in the back in the roof of the building are utterly decimated in an amazing reveal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just like, oh, okay. Then it's like pans over and I'm like, oh my god.
Like their town was destroyed.
Yeah, it's so bad. Oh, it's so good and like it's so bad in the good way. After the song, the pastor gives a sermon so powerful, I want to say, it made our President Roosevelt, use this as both a propaganda movie and that entire sermon as a propaganda slogan, printed in newspapers and magazines. That actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
As well as he pushed the movies out to theaters. During it, the past 2 years, a choir boy died. Mr. Ballard died, which makes him winning even more sad. As well as as Carol, which we already knew.
Mm-hmm.
Vin goes to Lady Belden to kind of give them unity. The camera pans up to see planes flying into battle as Pop in Circumstance plays, ushering an end of the movie and rolling of credits that then informs us to buy defense bonds and stamps every payday.
Which I actually like the end credits a little bit more too, because we didn't have any end credits at all with The Greatest Show on Earth.
No,
It just
and it felt
stopped.
which I like. It felt very, a good
Abrupt.
wrap up. Yeah. Well, I mean, it has that kind of like closing off or whatever, but such a good. Okay, so that was that movie. Is this your ranking? I see.
Oh yeah, I'll read them off in a minute, but just overall though, what do you think? I mean, I know you like this movie a lot. I wasn't expecting it like to be as invested into it as I ended up being. Like The Greatest Show on Earth was kind of like, yeah, okay, I understand. This is like we said last week, bringing the circus to your household. I understand what it's going with, but it just felt like kind of just like a good movie. But this one, it was getting me hooked more and more and more as we went through the whole story than I was when I first started watching it. Like this is really a good movie, even though
It is.
the majority of people nowadays won't watch it, but this is
No, they
really
won't.
good.
This is like the movie where I was saying, I don't see why anyone would even go and watch like The Greatest Show on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
I could see why someone would go back and watch this movie.
Like will eat my shoe if someday have an opportunity to ask this question and I'm wrong, but I will bet you that just Christopher Nolan, for example, watched this movie at some point before writing or filming Dunkirk.
Oh, he had to have.
I mean, not that he really needed it to,
Well, because Dunkirk is a bigger thing for Britain than it is for us, and he's British, so he would probably
yeah,
already know it.
yeah, but I mean, this is like an essential movie for anybody that's thinking about writing anything in World War II. I mean, it's just not that it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's not like it's a must watch or you're not going to understand anything about World War II, but it's like a staple kind of. It's a World War II movie without focusing so much on the actual war itself, but focusing on the human aspect of
Impact.
it. Yeah, how lives were affected by it.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, so your rankings, the one you've listed off.
So
Parasite number one.
yeah.
We've done five now. Parasite number one.
Hmm.
Forrest Gump. Mrs.
Hmm.
Miniver. Shape of Water. Greatest Show on Earth.
And that's just my ranking. But I
I
think
would
whenever we compile this together at the very end, and we can even do it now, is come together on an agreement on a ranking of these.
I agree with you. The problem with I would definitely agree about Parasite. My problem with Forrest Gump is mostly that I've seen too much of it.
Yeah,
So I
and
can't be
that's
like,
a
oh, it's so good because I'm like, well, yeah, it's Forrest Gump. I don't need to think about it.
and
But
yeah, I think just with the five we have right now, it's just one of those movies that yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times. It's not going to stay up that high for very long. Like the more we watch, I feel like there's going to be a lot of movies that are going to end up jumping it. But it's also
but then
the more feel good movie out of all of these.
yes, well, this one has like a feel good message at the end, but it's definitely
Mhm.
a kind of a downer. Would you then move Mrs. Miniver up, or no? You think it's? I mean, I
For
would definitely
Forrest
say.
Gump,
The problem is, right, that Forrest Gump is such a technical marvel that I'm sure Mrs. Miniver was at the time, but it's
I
not now.
I think if we look at it this way, as writing and directing are excellent in both. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
technical aspects are excellent in both. Visuals, obvious. I mean, just in general, going into the technicals, are excellent in both. Sound, stuff like that, great.
I
I
guess,
think what it
yeah.
comes down to is the performance, which the performances by the people by the actors in Mrs. Miniver are great, obviously, because one for one of the performances,
For
right?
both of them, for
Both of them.
both supporting actress and main actress.
Obviously, they're great, but I think if you compare those to the performance that Hanks gives,
That's
it's
true.
like I mean, Hanks in that movie is like I mean, that's a legendary performance. It's gonna last
The
forever.
I agree, but because this is fun to actually debate stuff and not just agree, uh, I would say that acting has changed.
Hmm. Well, I
So
agree with that.
So that makes that kind of unfair because they would not have even thought to, you know, do it that way back then. But I still agree with you, but I'm just gonna throw that caveat out there. I would
Yeah.
say I would also agree because one of the things that I liked about the start of the movie in Mrs. Miniver that vanishes
Hmm.
is that idea of like, spending above your means and all of that stuff, and that kind of goes away.
Hmm.
Which I mean, there's an argument for it to be made why it's gone, but the fact that it does leave and it felt like watching him like, oh, this movie's gonna be about, class and the difference and like class disparity, and then that kind of goes away. I'm like, oh well. So I could see
Yeah.
why. I would agree. I agree with your
Yeah.
rankings so far.
I feel like those. I feel like they could be flip flopped easily. It just depends on how you're looking at it. But those two so far are probably our closest ones.
Yeah,
I
I would
mean,
agree.
Shape of Water. I mean, you know how I feel. I know you like it more than I do, but I just think compared to Miss Miniver, I think there is
Mrs. Miniver
pretty
so much.
decent, a pretty decent gap in between those two.
Yeah, I would. I mean, dialogue, just dialogue comparison
Hmm.
alone, so much better. Sharper script. Not. I mean, again, I would say visual is better in Shape of Water, but that's also,
Hmm.
decades and decades, like, over 50 years difference. All right, do you want me to spin the wheel?
Yeah, like well,
Yeah.
real quick, I would say that it's gonna be interesting seeing this each week, but I would say there's pretty big gap, pretty good sized gap, I would say, between Parasite and Forrest Gump. So plenty of space to add more movies in there. And Parasite might not be the best movie yet. I mean, it is now, but might not stay at number
We have
one.
lots of movies to watch.
Hmm. And
We
I
have
think there's a pretty good gap between Miniver and Shape of Water, and I think there's a even bigger gap between Shape of Water and The Greatest Show on
there's
Earth.
so much gap. All right. So I told you, I texted you this.
Hmm.
This week and next week. are both weeks where I'm going to be busy. And so
Mhm.
you know what that means when I hit this wheel, right? You know we're going to get the epics that are going to be, 3 hours long. So I'm going to have to spend 6 hours. Or if we get like Lord of the Rings, I'm going to have to spend 6 hours just leading up to the movie we're going to have to watch.
And we talked about it. We're not going to cheat it. So if it does land on that, then
You know what though,
did it.
Shane?
Mhm.
You would never know.
That's true.
It's all from my end. But of course I'm too good not to do that. All right, give me
I
that
would
40.
I would like to see us maybe jump a little bit newer just to give more back and forth between the old and the newer. But
I
I'm
mean,
okay with
that's
whatever we get at this point.
we're making it random on purpose, so that's not like I get why you say that, but I like this ability that we can get anything.
Yeah.
We can get
Yeah, I'm
really
okay with it
anything.
because I was very surprised with Miss Miniver. I'm happy that um, I actually got to watch it or have a reason to watch it.
And we own it now. You bought it.
Yep.
All right, give me that good Foley. Uh,
Done.
we got The Godfather.
Did we really?
Okay, so this is the one where I'm cheating.
Okay.
It's Godfather Part 2. But this is literally the only movie where I say because it is the sequel,
Mhm.
we do Godfather.
That's fair. And then we do Godfather 2 whenever that comes back up again.
Yes. So
Okay.
let us highlight. We're behind the scenes now. That is 72. Let me highlight that. Dang it, my computer is being super slow.
The
And that
Godfather, which I should have, man, I should have got it last week because it was on sale last week. But I was like, there's no way we're going to get that so soon.
I mean, and to be fair, technically we didn't, but that's again the only one where I was ever like, yeah, we're going to cheat it a little bit. So, all right, it's off our list, so we're never gonna get it again. Um, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of the things on YouTube.
Oh, and a little fun bit of before we do our little exit, a little fun trivia for you and for anybody
Okay.
listening to this. This will be the first time I have watched The Godfather from start to finish.
I watched it for film class.
Yeah, we didn't have to, and I have seen like small bits and pieces of it on TV, but I have never watched it from start to finish.
I will say, I will preface this that I mean, I can see it's a classic because I watched it, but
Yeah.
because we did it in like a classroom, like classroom theater, not like an actual cinema or at home. Uh,
Hmm.
bad mixing problems. So I did not actually know what was happening in a lot of the movie. I was watching it, but I was like, what's actually happening? Like there's some, and they don't put the words on. I put closed captions on. So
Ah,
this would be the first time I actually know what's happening in a movie.
and this may be the first. Maybe I'm saying this now. I haven't seen it in its entirety yet, but this may be the first movie to give Parasite a run for its money.
I would almost agree. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, follow us on all the places at Tower City Media.
And send in an email if you guys have any comments or questions, anything you'd like us to address on the show at TowerCityMedia@gmail.com.
And we will see you guys next week for The Godfather Part 1. All right.
All right.
So, okay, Shane, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want us to pause because this call is fine,
Mm-hmm.
but we might have to use the Skype call.
Why? What happened?
Uh, Nothing bad happened. My Audacity has been very slow and like was lagging a lot.
Oh, okay.
So